Good evening. My name is Frits Bussemaker, and we're going to close this long day, this KNVI online event with this late night show. And we have 5 guests to have a discussion on the impact of digital technology on society. With us here in the studio, we have 2 guests, ousewies van der Laan, Karen van der Zanden. And if everything is connected, we have 3 speakers online. May I introduce Irakli Beridze, Jonathan Reichental, and Sahota. Guys.
Maybe they can see us.
Yeah. But I would like to see them. So I want to ask them some questions.
I would like to see them as well.
Irakli.
Here's one.
Hi. We don't have sound yet, Irakli, but hopefully we will have sound in a while.
But it's great to see you.
Yeah. Okay, we'll use sign language to communicate. No, but ladies and gentlemen, we have organized a panel to have a discussion on the impact of digital technology on our society. Now we have our 3 panel members. I just wanted to check, Neil, Jonathan, can you hear us? Can you say hello to the audience, please?
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Neil.
I can hear you, Frits. Good to see you.
Hi, Jonathan. How are you? And Irakli, how are you?
Hopefully you hear me as well.
Oh, excellent. Good. No, we got that covered. First of all, I'm going to introduce who these panel members are. And let me introduce with ladies first. I'm going to introduce ousewies van der Laan. Now, people in the Netherlands will know ousewies because she was a former member of the European Parliament. People abroad, outside the Netherlands, would recognize her, could recognize her as a former board member of the ICANN. But what's your role today?
Since the 1st of October, I've become the director of Transparency International here in the Netherlands. So that really is a great way to combine all my different backgrounds. It's about fighting corruption and making, in favor of transparency and integrity. And I can use my political background, not yet so much the technology background, but that's what I'm looking forward to. And it's great to work with many people who are dedicated to more justice and the rule of law and democracy.
Excellent. Okay, hey, welcome.
Thank you.
Karen, we've invited you because you have 2 roles. On one hand, you're the general manager of the IT Circle Netherlands, which is a network of IT professionals with end users. But you've also been recently appointed as a board member of iPoort, which is a community within the Dutch members of Parliament to talk about the link between IT and digital.
Correct.
So we'll come back to you, that's clear. But we have 3 guests. I'm going to start off with Irakli. Irakli Beridze, you have quite a unique position because you're the very first person within the whole United Nations community who set up an organization around artificial intelligence to fight crime with UNICRI. For the people who are not familiar with UNICRI, can you please explain briefly what UNICRI is, what it stands for, and what you're doing?
Well, UNICRI is a UN agency, as you know, Frits, and we are working to support United Nations member states in the issues related to the crime prevention, criminal justice, rule of law, human rights, and the Center for AI and Robotics is set up to facilitate discussions related to how artificial intelligence can support law enforcement agencies with finding solutions related to the AI-related problems, and at the same time to understand how other side criminals can use artificial intelligence for us and for the policy makers, decision makers, to have equipment and to be prepared to answer to these issues.
Okay, very relevant. And also, audience, Irakli is also a recipient of the Nobel Prize in a former life. Can you expand on that?
Right. I mean, before several jobs before, I worked at the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, and we were awarded in 2013 the Nobel Peace Prize.
Okay, well, welcome to have you on board. So next we also have Sahota. Neil is a former master inventor at IBM, a professor, an advisor to the United Nations. Actually, one of the patents which Neil has in its name also was one of the bases to develop IBM Watson. So Neil, nice to have you with us. You're based in California at the moment, Orange County.
I am. It's the weather's nice out here. Our day's starting. Well, I think you guys is getting towards the end, Fritz.
Yeah, we're closing down almost. Yeah, this is the last ride home. This is the home stretch. Hey, good to have you here. And finally, Jonathan Reichental. Jonathan is the former CIO of the city of Palo Alto, been recognized in the state as one of the 20 most influential CIOs, and he's also author of a highly successful book, Smart City for Dummies. And Jonathan, just like me, traveled the world. Last time we met face-to-face was in New Zealand, and talking about the impact of digital technology. So welcome, guys.
Thanks, Frits.
Good.
Thank you.
Hey, now this discussion is going to be about the impact of digitization on society, and will also make a very direct link to the Sustainability Development Goals as defined by the United Nations. But first of all, I just want to begin with a question for you. What's the most exciting development in digital technology, Lucevis, where you think, well, that's something everybody should dive into?
Well, I have to say that the most exciting thing right now is that we have an internet that actually works when everybody's working at home, doing their yoga, going to church, doing their parties, doing all their job stuff. So, as someone, of course, a former board member of the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, and knowing the complexity of all the technology involved, I'm not really looking forward that much to all the, it's amazing stuff happening, but just the fact that we're all in lockdown and we all managed to stay connected, I find almost miraculous, and a big compliment to all the people who make it work, because it is one of the few things that is truly multi-stakeholder, it's truly global, and the fact that we're all connected in this crisis is incredibly valuable.
It is the new normal, but is it normal, Karen? Is this normal for us?
Yes, I would say, new normal. I think we all, I was surprised by the speed of adaptability after the COVID crisis hit all of us in spring, and how we all adapted to this new normal, although we don't want this to be normal, but we are all coping with it, and not only coping with it, but really adapting it in our lives, finding new ways how to cooperate together and share things. And new normal. I hope it will not stay, but the technology has enabled us to stay in touch with each other and to work from anywhere.
And how does it work? I'm going to Irakli. I know you just had a full week an event. Was that online, I would assume?
Yes, and I really subscribe to the words which was mentioned about the internet. Obviously, through these technologies, through the platforms we are using, we are actually taking a lot out of it. Obviously, we are in the pandemic situation. There is a lot of negativity happening around us, but at the same time, we do need to take good out of it as well. For example, last week, we held a global meeting, AI for Law Enforcement. It was the third edition together with Interpol, and we had 600 people participating from all corners of the world. First two editions were physical ones in Singapore, and we had around 100 people, but mostly from the Western countries who could afford to come to the meetings. Now we had people from Africa, Latin America, South America, Southeast Asia, and many others. 80 countries participated. Connecting 80 countries with 600 people through the platforms, whether it's Zoom or Microsoft Teams or others, that's really amazing, and something that we do need to actually take into account. And in the future, I do believe that we do need to learn some of the lessons. And one of them would be that we do always have to maintain the virtual component when we are having discussions, because it is more inclusive and there are more possibilities to include more people from the world without spending enormous amounts of funds for bringing people or for them to spend money to come.
Okay. Jonathan, any reactions? Normally you do a lot of speaking engagements around the world in airplanes. Do you see this as a benefit, or what's your take on that?
Yeah, it's a mixed bag. Up until March of 2020, I was somewhere in the world giving a talk or advising a government, and so I was very present. And then when things shut down, I had a question. What will my life look like, and will I be able to have the voice that I have, historically had. And interestingly, I've done more speaking and more consulting under COVID than outside of it. I'm getting to speak in places like Kosovo and Kazakhstan and Jakarta. And I'm on late night internet TV in the Netherlands right now, which is quite remarkable. Yeah. I'm going to Dubai this weekend, actually. I'm getting on a plane for the first time since March, taking a little bit of a risk, but extreme precautions. I don't want to go entirely virtual. I do miss the human interaction and the networking and the relationships that can be built and will be built. But I think we can move to more of a hybrid model. I think we can do more. We can do more with the internet and, there's video connectivity we have. I think that when we say the words new normal, I think what we really need to be saying there is life before pandemic had a lot of challenges. Let's not go back to that, right? A lot of significant inclusion, equality, digital divides, a significant amount of issues. Those are just a few that come to mind. So can we go back to new normal, which says, let's do more relationship building virtually. Let's not, spew as much carbon as necessary into the atmosphere with our flights, and let's do a lot of those. But where necessary, where essential, and where it makes sense to kind of move the needle forward, let's do in-person events too. So I think that's part of what looks like the new world will look like a little bit. We'll see, of course, a year from now if we do that or not.
And I told us you're going to keep us up to date when you do travel to Saudi Arabia, what that looks like. So I'll be reading your blogs in the future, near future.
Of course.
Okay. Now, by the way, I have to remind the viewers that unfortunately in the previous show, we found out that YouTube prohibited us showing YouTube videos. So we can't show any videos at this stage. So it's just going to be us. Okay, but we'll cope with that. Now, Neil, you also did a lot of talking around the world. How's your life changed? For the good, for the bad? What's the effect?
I think it's, I know we're talking about the new normal, but I think it's actually getting ready for the next normal. We're always in a perpetual state of change. Yeah. It's quite different not to being on the road and, interacting with people. And I've seen actually there's been like a shift. As bad as COVID's been, and it's been horrific, it's also been the great accelerator. So a lot of things that were weak but kind of just good enough suddenly under the light of COVID weren't, and we had to do something about it. And I think that's actually jump-started a lot of things. Like you think about virtual learning and, parents, your opinions inside of how it's been doing. I can tell you that a lot of people thought that we wouldn't be able to make this kind of leap for 10, 15 years, right? Reasons, and overnight we're actually doing it. And now I'm not hearing just talking about how do we improve it, but I hear a lot of people talking about how do we bring virtual reality classrooms to bear, right? Because just the opportunities for education interaction are important, but now suddenly we can do it in new ways with people around the world actually getting together. Okay. And so I look at these great opportunities. We kind of think also Zoom calls, video conference calls aren't quite the same thing as in-person communication. And so a lot of my work has shifted a bit to now people talking about how do we build resilience with people, with employees, with teams. How do we fight the disconnected feeling, this sense of isolation? I'm sure we've all suffered through Zoom fatigue, but it's interesting that we've unlocked some doors and are doing some great things now, but we've got a whole new set of challenges to also deal with, which is why I feel like we're just shifting to our next normal.
And I think that's also where the IT professional comes in, because at the moment we use technology to indeed have these meetings, be able to interact, but we're missing the social element, the serendipity for the off chance meetings. Do you have any insight on developments in technology which will allow that serendipity come into play? Have you seen anything happening at the moment?
I could talk to that. There's a lot more people tapping into AI, especially psychographic profiling and neurolinguistics, to try and do some of that relationship building that we normally do face to face, but we lose something virtually. So actually a suite of tools in the realm of artificial empathy. So as we actually interact with people, we're getting a little coaching or guidance and saying like, well, not this person may be a little frustrated or be a little angry, but they care more about the value of something, or they're an auditory type of learner. And so some of those things we take just, out of like nonverbal communication, try and actually bridge some of that gap as a result. And there's lots of good companies like Serum AI that even have Zoom plugins to help people do some of this stuff. Not quite the same, but it's actually an interesting model for the virtual environment. I think though the serendipity as you're talking about, Frits, is still on us as people to try and actually create. We just have to realize that the ways we try to do things before don't quite translate in the virtual world. So we have to find the new way of doing it.
Yeah. Okay. No, I like that.
Yeah, Frits, I wanted to jump in there real quick on that particular item. I have a blog, a podcast. I also have a blog, but I have a podcast that I do occasionally during the year called Drinking Wine, Talking Tech. And as you can probably gather, it's about drinking wine and talking tech. But in our first episode, my host and I, we were talking about this very question. How do you emulate the serendipity that happens in real life experiences versus the digital? And I coined this term. I called it digidepity. And I just wanted to let you know two things. One, after the season was over, we looked at which podcast episode was the most popular, and it seemed to really resonate. Everybody loved this idea of digital serendipity, digidepity, and realizing that we do need to answer that question. And there are a few new social platforms. One that I can think of is something called Clubhouse, that actually tries to create, these kind of random moments between effectively business strangers. I get a notification pretty much every Monday that, if I'd like to meet some new people, I can do that and go online and make that happen. So there are some interesting attempts to replicate this, but in a different way.
Okay. We're getting there.
It's interesting because for me, LinkedIn already does that. Is when I have one of these things, then I kind of reach out to people, or people say, "Hey, I saw you somewhere," and then sometimes there's weirdos, but generally it's interesting people who want to make a real connection. I mean, you weed out all the kind of people with business offers who didn't actually read the profile, but I like the way that we can connect very easily, and I find people in general extremely accessible. When you say, "Look, I want to," I said, Transparency International is just starting to think about how technology can help fight corruption. Damn, all at once you get, messages from strangers going, "I'm working on this, I'm working on that, let's bring it together." And I love that about the internet. And now it's true, it doesn't matter anymore where people are, and the way that we can connect together and unite people who want to do tech for good, I think is spectacular right now.
That's actually what brings us all together, Tech for Good. I got my AI for Good shirt on. I just saw that Neil also had his backdrop, the AI for Good, from the AI for Good Global Summit, which the ITU organizes, looking at how AI can help develop the Sustainability Development Goals. Before we go into the good side and what an IT professional can do and what he or she should take into mind, also coming back to Irakli. Irakli, you set up the very first AI chapter within the United Nations, but to look at fighting crime and also what crime can do. Is it just AI, or do you take it much broader than AI?
Well, I mean, from the center side, Frits, we are looking at the AI and related technologies, how this could be misused, how it could be directly used by criminals or terrorists. We just issued, actually 2 weeks ago, a comprehensive report together with Europol on the malicious use of AIs and uses and abuses. And it's a large report with numerous use cases, how it could be used. There are many of the potential uses. There are many which been already used, and a lot more which could be coming. Therefore, our center is one of the first UN centers who is looking at the dark side of AI, but from the perspective to learn from it and to prepare that we have all these defense lines, solutions, and understanding from the policymaker side or practitioners or others how to deal with these issues. Because this is, as you know, in exponential technology. Technology is growing very fast, and criminals and terrorists are also adapting to it and trying to understand it. While at this moment we may not have AI-related terrorism, it doesn't mean that the ingredients are not there, knowledge is not there, and organizations, terrorist organizations are not there who would like to learn and would like to use it. Therefore, we always need to be 1 or actually 10 steps ahead, so that we are prepared and understanding this, how it can happen, and what are the solutions we can put against it.
Okay, Lucius, you wanted to react?
Yeah, Irakli, I just wanted to ask you, when I hear about, you know, the crime fighters and the technology, then I'm always immediately concerned about the human rights aspects. I mean, I was at a seminar last week where the European Commission said, well, encryption is getting in the way of us fighting terrorists. And you think, seriously, guys? You're still trying to have this debate, but many law enforcement people are. And I just wanted to see that, looking at the advantages, looking at the dangers, what perspective are you guys taking to make sure that at least human rights are protected in all these developments?
Yeah, fantastic question. And I'm glad that you really did ask this, because from our side, we underline human rights, fundamental freedoms as one of the main prerequisites for using AI for the law enforcement. For last week's meeting, for example, transparency, accountability, and the trust emerges crucial factors for the law enforcement's AI-enabled future during our meeting. So what we are also doing together with Interpol is we are developing something which is called Responsible AI Toolkit for the law enforcement, and it includes all information and all the guidelines and all requirements how AI should be used by the law enforcement. And this is a very inclusive process. This is something that we are open for the civil society, academia, law enforcement agencies, private sector, and others. So this is not that we are rushing into it. It's going to be 2 or 3 year long process to develop such a toolkit, which will be a rolling document, and I'll be happy to also involve you there in this work. And I'm just extending this from Fritz's facilitation and audience.
Okay, no, fine. But this is a great discussion, because this is actually a bridge to a question I have for both Karen, Neil, and Jonathan. Karen, you have a community of IT professionals. Jonathan used to be a CIO with his own staff, and Neil, you worked for an IT company, IBM. This discussion, how relevant is it for the average IT professional? Should they think about this? Should this be on their minds, that this is part of what they're doing?
Yeah, Frits, to be precise, it is on their minds. I think for a lot of IT professionals, this is algorithm transparency. If you are, what do we use in the company? How do we use it? But also, how are we clear and transparent about the usage in companies? These are questions, and not only this about algorithm and transparency there, but all other things like green IT, sustainability. These are all issues which are on the agenda of IT professionals. And I think they should be on the agenda of all of us. Sometimes it's not clear yet for everybody what you can do, or take, for example, green IT. I think there is a lot of unconsciousness of what is possible there, and I think communities also are there to make sure, in discussions like we are having, also to make sure that people are informed and can take small steps every day in their work, because we all need to do it together.
Yeah. Yeah, I see Jonathan, I see you nodding. I just want to reflect to when you were a CIO at Palo Alto. Did you discuss social impact, SDGs with your staff when you were there?
We certainly did. Yeah. And, you know, working in the public sector, you know, the social element is a big part of that, right? You're not necessarily going in to do public service as a get-rich scheme. You know, you're doing it for different reasons. But I even wanted to sort of just kind of address this question slightly differently.
Sure.
So I'm a professor at a few universities. I teach at the University of San Francisco, and I teach at ESADE in Spain, and I'm often part of, you know, a technology program. And these university programs are excellent. They teach, you know, current and future IT professionals about how technology works, how to program computers, how to do AI and all that. But they haven't historically asked the most important question and taught at the core here, which is, sure, we can teach you how to build all this stuff, but should you build it? Should you do it? And I introduced into my curriculums in many of the programs I teach, this broader topic that's not mine, it didn't originate with me, it's a few decades old, called technoethics. And what I'm seeing now, which is interesting as we approach sort of 2021, the third decade of the 21st century, is that we're beginning to see the subject of technoethics be part of the curriculum. Because we have to teach students not only, how to build things, but how to critically think about whether we should build them and how we should build them and how they may be used, to think through consequences. Because certainly what we found in the fourth industrial revolution is you can change a line of configuration code in San Francisco and you can impact the lives of people in Mumbai in India, just like that. So not only do students need to get educated on this, but I want to see, and I'm seeing increasingly the topic of technoethics, in the C-suite, and it's beginning to trickle down through the organization. I really do see in the sort of the decade that's ahead and beyond, where all bets are off, but certainly see, technology is going to let us to do a lot of things. It already is. I mean, what AI is going to enable us to do will be breathtaking in the next decade or two. Yeah. Some of it not good, some of it not so good. We ought not to be just saying, let's build it because it's a good idea. We ought to be asking the question, should we build it? And if you're an IT professional, that's got to be part of your toolkit. That has got to be part of your toolkit.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask this question to Neil. Neil, you've been involved in the development of IBM's Watson, which is a great, powerful tool with a lot of good applications. But was that question ever raised within the team? Should we build this?
Yeah, it actually was right off the bat. It's no secret that we were getting death threats constantly, but when the whole idea came about, can we build a machine that could play this game, right? The Jeopardy challenge. The question was like, if we do this, we know what some of the backlash is going to be. So what are the safeguards, or are there proper safeguards? Should we actually move forward with this or not? And so it wasn't just a question of like usage, which I think is actually one of the critical things that Jonathan was talking about. It was also a question of, why would we do something like this? What's the value we'd actually create and what's involved with that? One probably maybe simple example for most people is self-driving cars. And there's a great debate about it. When are they going to be safe enough? And can they really be better than humans and these intrinsic qualities? And what we've actually seen is a shift. Is that because we've talked about what are the things involved, how we make the car safer, and all the different kinds of data they can process, radar, lidar, auditory. But the question is now evolved not to so much like when do we make these cars legal, but it's become now when do we actually ban human drivers? Right, because what we've learned is the machines drive better than we do. They just process way more information. They don't get distracted, right? And it's the variability in the traffic system that really causes the problems. And it turns out that humans are the main cause of variability. So the UN has actually, I think, estimated there's about 20 million people a year that die or suffer permanent horrific injury, and self-driving cars will eliminate 90% of that. So these are the lens that we actually think through. So even in the Watson days, these are the lens we're thinking through. Usage, very critical, but why? Why would we even do this? What's the value we're trying to create? And I think this is a whole new mindset for IT professionals, because used to we're like, okay, we're trying to build this. We know what the sunny side scenario is, the accepted behaviors, and maybe they're thinking about exceptions. But we build something and go, we can't do that anymore. The technology moves so quickly. You think about AI, we're trusting machines to make recommendations, in some case decisions for us. We have to get much better at the philosophy side of this, the scenarios that may unfold, how good actors or bad actors might use the technology or something that we build, and see, what's the balance here.
Okay, a conscious choice to build it. I'm going back to Jonathan. Jonathan, in your book, you could say when you talk about smart cities for dummies, in this case, the dummies, are those the civil servants of the city themselves? Are they smart enough to build a smart city? Do they understand technology enough?
So yeah, it's got to be one of the greatest book titles ever, right? Smart Cities for Dummies. I know it's not supposed to be in any way offensive. It's more of a tongue-in-cheek, a bit of fun.
I know.
It's written obviously for everybody who's interested in the future of our cities, and it's certainly written for city leaders for sure. I had them in mind, having been one myself for a while. The way I look at the sort of the field right now of cities is you'll hear a lot about some outliers. You're going to hear a lot about Amsterdam, of course. You'll hear a lot about Helsinki and Melbourne and even San Francisco and Dubai. These are cities that are doing incredible things, no doubt. They're having successes. They got great case stories that they share with the world. But you have to remember there are a little over 10,000 sort of medium to large cities in the world, and if we're talking about sort of the same 10 every time, what about the other 9,900 or so cities? The fact is, some of them are doing nothing or little. Some of them are doing a little, and some of them are doing more. There's a wide spectrum. And then your question, Frits, is well, why? What's happening? What's holding them back? Part of it is technology competency. There's no doubt about it. As a new generation of leaders, rise up in the organization, we're starting to see them be much more comfortable with digitalization and IoT and big data and AI, the things that are really driving change in some of our leading cities today. They're becoming more comfortable with that. They're also more comfortable with taking risks and realizing that we have to do that if we're going to build the kinds of cities we need to see. Two other quick reasons. Number two is you've got to have the skill in your organization. If we're going to use data, for example, to move the needle in cities, and we can, you got to have data skills. There's a lot of city leaders and mayors that are frustrated that, they hear all the wonderful things that can be done with data. And it's the one thing, by the way, cities have in abundance, and yet they don't see the results. And then you look closer and you say, well, do you have any data analysts on your staff? Do you have data scientists? Are you hiring for the talent you need for the, the solutions you're trying to deliver? And the answer is often no. So we got to invest in people and make the right hiring decisions. And finally, there's a lot of struggles about how do you afford some of these things. I'm not going to say that the question of how do I actually afford to pay for new tech, I'm not going to say that question doesn't come up. It comes up a lot. And in my book, I write at length about the options every city has to move forward with innovation, and that money, while essential and something you have to have to move forward in many areas, shouldn't be a roadblock. There are ways to go forward, including things like partnerships and community engagement, and different funding mechanisms. So that's sort of the top. I'll just kind of that's my sort of summary. We can go deeper, but these are real reasons why you don't see necessarily the progress that we would think we would see in the short term.
I have an observation before I share my observation. Maybe you made the same observation, Lucevis.
No, I have a question because I haven't read your book. I'm definitely now really starting to get really excited about it, and I'm going to add it to my Christmas wish list. But where do politicians come in? Because having been a politician, one of the things that strikes me now, and that struck me when I was trying to make the connection between the technological world and the policy world, and which I always very affectionately called planet politics and planet geek, meant as a term of respect, two very different worlds which don't necessarily understand each other. Where do politicians come into play when you look at, building smart cities, using technologies? Because I find usually they don't get elected for those skills, they get elected for other reasons and may need some catch-up.
Yeah, so it's an important point you're making. There's many participants, right? Many stakeholders, from the community itself to the vendor community to academia, staff, and then you've got the political side of things. All of those stakeholders matter. I do think that in many cities, the elected officials are not being pulled into the conversation to the degree they should be. Sometimes the only time a council member has an opportunity to weigh in is when you're asking for money, right? You're a staff member and you're sitting in front of the council saying, I'm looking for $1 million to do this project. Here are the details. That's, in my view, already too late. And, getting back to sort of what are some of the leadership skills that are needed. Any elected official today who wants to try to move things forward needs to be more competent and more knowledgeable about tech than ever before. It's not an IT subject anymore; it's an organizational subject. So I definitely think that if you get elected, you need to spend a bit of time working with your IT team. Reading up on technology, working with your peers who are good at this, and being much more engaged the entire life cycle of innovation than has historically happened.
I think we'll definitely.
Maybe I can add something here from the global sort of international perspective. On the politician side, I mean, what is happening globally is that countries starting from 2017-18 started to adapt something called AI national strategies. And these are very important documents because these are the governmentally approved documents working together with the private sector and others for the specific sectors where these technologies can make difference and invest in this and try to understand it from this country's perspective. Right now, we have around 45 countries which have these national strategies. And from the UN side, this is not much because 45 countries, it's around, we still have 160 countries basically left. And what we are experiencing right now, this growing digital divide, which has a potential to become even larger if this tendency continues, because what we would like to actually ensure and achieve is that all countries have these strategies, all countries enjoy the benefits of this technology, and all countries understand the underlying risks associated to it. Therefore, we are trying to support countries in development of these strategies and in adoption of the functional strategies. The strategy is not just a document which you want to put it on the shelf, but something that you want to use it and get real benefits out of it.
I actually want to follow up on that, both a question for you, Irakli, and also to Neil, because you both work with and for UN agencies. Do you feel that, I would say, the non-IT part of the UN agencies, are they curious about what IT can do, what AI can do? So Irakli, do you get a lot of people visiting your office and say, tell me what you're doing and how can I make use of that?
A lot.
Yeah.
I mean, the simple answer is a lot. We have UN member states visiting us all the time, governments visiting us. I mean, I'm based in The Hague and I have constantly ambassadors or other diplomatic community coming and being interested to specific applications, being interested to specific ways how this technology from different domains can support to solve concrete problems which could be associated in the respective countries. The same thing happens from other UN agencies who may not be directly sort of from the technical side, but from the policy side to understand the benefit of it or understand the risks. And there is a large level of cooperation happening with the countries, with UN agencies and others as well.
Okay, and Neil, you work with, I know, with the ITU and some other UN agencies. What do you see? How curious is the community?
Very much. I mean, the big question everyone has is, what should I be doing? They're all like, I know I need to be doing something. What is it? How do I figure that out? Yeah. That's actually something that I talk about in my own book on the AI Revolution. Yeah. Too many, I think, people think that my smart technologists will tell me, here's what we should be doing. Problem is they often, no matter how smart we are, don't know the on-the-ground pain points the different groups actually face. And so it's really this yin and yang model where the non-technical people need to know a little bit about technology to start thinking about opportunities, and the technical people have to understand a little bit about the domain space, understand the usage and the value, and how to actually maximize that.
So, if I could. Yep.
I just wanted to pop in because, I think there's a lot of people talking about opportunities, and a lot of that is being driven really hard, which is great. I mean, I think we see that with all new technologies. How can you make money? How can you solve problems? But I think it's really important that we also look at some of the risks and create some of the limits and boundaries, because sometimes what happens is that one waits until a new technology starts to be used for bad things as well. And then there's always a huge risk of regulatory backlash. And then the regulators try to catch up. They try to impose legislation. They want to be seen to be doing something rather than actually doing something that makes sense. And I think that's where if we don't bring the policymakers, the politicians on board, and then a couple of bad things happen, and before you know it, you're gonna have something strange happen which we didn't want, and we might miss actually some of the opportunities because of that.
Now, sorry,
I
Neil.
fully agree on this. If I just very quick comment, our recently issued report together with Europol talks right about this kind of threats, and I think that it should be sort of widely available for the politicians, for the governments, and for the relevant agencies, for them to have a direct understanding what sort of threats exist in this domain. And threats are real, ingredients are there, and one day something can really happen. And we need to be prepared about it, and it has to be very well known.
Okay, so then a question. I'm going to take this local, guys. Unfortunately, so Neil and Johnson, sorry. I'm going to briefly look at the Netherlands, because we all know we're living in this fourth industrial wave. We're all going digital. But we have 150 members of parliament in the Netherlands. We're going to have an election next year. And all the key players who do anything, who have IT on the radar, they're all going to disappear. Yeah. So how can we, if we have a policy-making community of 150 people, how are we going to get them to understand what the real impact of digitization is? What's your advice?
You want to start?
Yeah, that's really one of our main problems or issues we need to tackle. Yeah. Because fortunately in the Dutch parliament there was a temporary commission which now has, they are all leaving, so, what you're referring to. But fortunately it has been decided that it will be a fixed community. It will be, so that's a good start. But I think we need to enable the dialogue and also to go a little bit beyond. I'm not a techie. I wasn't a techie. I think Luce was also saying we are not techies. And after 3 years now in this world, it's also going beyond the buzzwords. So going beyond and really see what are the issues we need to solve and how can technology help us to solve these issues, and not be afraid to go beyond the buzzwords and understand what kind of technologies are there and how we should use them, and also what do we need to do with regard to regulation, because well, we need that. Like GDPR, we need more regulation.
But is it, are they afraid of technology? Is it too complex? What's the reason why that doesn't have any? Is it not sexy enough? What's the reason?
Well, until now it has not been sexy enough. I think it's one of these things. So when I was in the Dutch parliament, there was a technology committee. We were then concerned with nanotechnology. You guys remember? I mean, it's just really weird to imagine that that was the big thing back then. But then what happens is that now there's enough focus on it. I think it's getting sexier, also because it's risky, it's dangerous, people know that things are coming. So I can imagine that really good people will go into the Digital Affairs Committee, I'm hoping. But the key thing is to educate. And I think one of the things that we neglect to do, and this is not just a Dutch problem, this is a global problem because I meet politicians from everywhere, is that people are afraid to ask questions. They don't want to be seen to be stupid, definitely not with a camera around, definitely not with another politician around. So you're gonna have to do a lot of one-on-ones. And if, we have an audience now, I think, of information specialists, take the time to explain to people yet again, how do these things work? What is AI? What is blockchain? What is encryption? How do things work? On the other hand, you don't always have to know how things actually work in order to regulate. I don't know how electricity works, but I know it needs to be regulated. So, these are things where we should be more open. I hope we get to a culture where we can actually say, look, I don't know how it works. Can somebody explain it? But we're going to have to make that connection between the techies and the policymakers. Otherwise, we're going to lose them.
And we don't need the deep knowledge, I think, to be able to regulate and to understand, and also how we can use it. We need the techies to develop it.
Okay, well, we have two professors on the panel talking about information technology. So, Jonathan, Neil, how do you do that? How do you train politicians? Do they ever listen to what you have to say?
Well, go ahead, Neil. Go ahead, Neil.
I was going to say yes. That's how AI for Good got started. That actually is how it actually got started. I was asked 5 years ago to give a keynote, And I was warned that the leaders thought AI is Terminator time, that it's going to rise up, eradicate humanity, conquer the world. And so I gave a talk not just about what is AI, but I talked about how it's actually already being used for public service and how it could be used more for social good and for the SDGs. It was that evening when I got approached by some of the leadership saying, like, no, we actually never thought about using the technology for the SDGs. Tell me more. So I think the conversation has, but I think the points are spot on. Nobody wants to look foolish. No one wants to feel like they're dumb. And sometimes you don't know what questions to even ask.
Yeah.
And I think maybe some more of the private conversations would, again, this is the thing where it's all about the value, right? What's the value I'm trying to create, and focusing the conversation on that to see, is there something there or not? Then that's the question, should we actually do it, and how would this get used? It's a process. Yeah. There's not like a soundbite answer here for everybody. It takes time, investment, and commitment, but it means both sides are open to the exploration. And I found that's what's been most effective in, talking with politicians and figuring out not just, solutions with technology, but also policy and regulation and legislation around it as well.
Okay, Jonathan, anything to add?
That's good. I do. Well, my passion ultimately is education. So this is a topic that I very much love. And I think those of us who are, if you like, privileged enough to have some knowledge, our obligation is to help others and educate them around some of the things that we've figured out. I mean, what I am known for, and it makes sense now that the book is called Smart Cities for Dummies, is I take complicated subjects and make them accessible and understandable to everybody. There's nothing worse than the embarrassment of someone who asks a question and then a technologist goes ahead and explains it where it's right over their head, right? And so here right now I'm going to sort of address your audience directly. If you're an IT professional, you have a remarkable magical skill, because you know stuff that most of the world does not know. You know how stuff works, how to program computers. Maybe you know how microchips work, and perhaps you even know how electricity works. And you get to interact with, your colleagues and with your leadership. And if you're in government, you get to work with elected officials. Use that magical power. Use that magical power to help them. You can do that this afternoon. Well, it's night for you. You can do that tomorrow morning when you go to the office, or you're on a camera. You're on virtually connected to your teams. I would encourage you not to use acronyms. Don't immediately assume your audience knows what you're talking about, but don't talk down. Be respectful, and let's all share this amazing knowledge we have. I learn from politicians, and I hope that they can learn about technology from me. To some of the guests who said it already, I'll echo. The one of the core competencies of the 21st century is the ability to learn, and then the ability to relearn. And if you have that, you're already ahead of the game.
Okay. Good point. So, Karen, how do you do that within your IT community of IT professionals? Is it just about basically getting them educated in communication?
Not only educating communication, it's also about sharing best practices, best knowledge. It's going developments are going so fast, technology developments, everything. And I think by sharing in communities, we will all benefit because there's so much to share and so much to learn from each other. And if we can democratize not just only the education, but also the best practices amongst each other, we will even grow further and harder in a faster pace. And well, currently with this online world where we all live in now, it's a big equalizer, I think, because we can do it even more fast and in a way. Yeah. Good.
Louise, in your time at ICANN, was this an issue?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have to say, there's something what I really love about working with engineers and programmers. They're allowed to make mistakes. They're like, "I will try this. I will try that," and yeah, that didn't work. And politics is the other way around. It's like if you make a mistake, you're out. And I really hope that culture of things are going so fast, and that you try something, it doesn't work, you try again. It's all about trying to solve things. And I think one of the big mistakes about what policymakers have, and at least in Holland, the political world, but I see it in other places as well, is that people are under pressure to find really quick solutions. They take very complex issues and simplify them and say, oh, we're going to fix this, fix that. I mean, U.S. elections, I think, were an interesting example of, the complexity, of actually solving the real issues, or saying, no, we'll build a wall and that solves it. So you have to really be able to dig down and to take the time. And I hope that also people will recognize that these things take time, and there's new technologies. We're going to find regulations. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to get some things right. And let's be accepting and learn that from one another. And to get away from this, I'm right, you're wrong, or I know better, you don't, because that's not going to get us anywhere.
Okay, I've seen a couple of people nod. I just want to check. Also, Irakli, are you allowed to make mistakes at UNICRI?
Yes, absolutely. Well, yeah, we are absolutely allowed to make mistakes. I think that's absolutely a normal process, and that's how we are learning, how we are accelerating. I mean, a lot of people do make that type of mistakes, and I think that this is a normal process everywhere in the world. At the United Nations, our agency, UNICRI, and especially its center, it's a very innovative, very new center. In the beginning, when I was launching it and opening it, a lot of people were asking many questions, and rightly so. I think it was also a very normal process. And Frits, you were at the opening. Neil was at the opening, where we were also giving Neil's books as a present to the politicians and policymakers who were coming there, and everybody was learning through that process. So I think that this learning process is very important. And as Jonathan was talking about education is the key in the future. I think that most of the risks which would be associated to the accelerated growth of technology, like, for example, with issues related to the employment or the pressure on the job markets, I think that through the education, through the reskilling, through the investing into the education of young people, that's one of the main solutions which we're going to have it for those issues.
So if I summarize also what Karen said a couple of years, the SDGs are very much on the agenda of the IT professional. It's on the board. But to make certain that it gets impact, we do need to educate a lot of people what it really is. Yeah. So does anybody have an advice how we can get the IT professionals engaged, proactive in playing their role to educate people? Do we need more Neils and Jonathans just to go out there and tell look, this is what IT is all about. This is what it can do.
I mean, I think one of the things I've found really mobilizes people's concrete examples. Yep. So I work in the field of integrity. The mayor of Bjelovar in Croatia has an app by which every single bill that is being paid is live on a website, and any citizen can look anytime. So he goes and have lunch, and then he puts in the bill. And I mean, to fight corruption, it's just incredible, And something like that captures the imagination. And I think, wow, in Europe we have 90,000 subnational, government authorities. We have more than 1 million politicians. If all of them would do that, can you imagine how much faith we would restore? So I think an example like that can immediately trigger people. And I'm sure right now people are thinking like, oh, we should do that in my country. Or to make variations of that. So I think concrete examples that capture the imagination are a great way to mobilize people. And then, you build communities around that.
Yeah, and in addition to that, it's not only solution, it can also be a joint problem. Because we're not the only one with this problem. You're in your organization. What we find with our communities, that also joining behind, with the pandemic, we all had the same issues. And how are we going to solve that? So the question also with social cohesion or finding serendipity, or that's a general problem. And to join together in Q&As and to share, and we also find solutions, and it's helping us also not feeling alone. You are not alone. And a lot of things and issues are worldwide.
Yeah. You see that also, Jonathan, in your work? Good examples. Are these global issues? Global examples which people can relate to? How do you transfer that knowledge of what IT can do?
Yeah, I mean, we have more ways than ever before to collaborate and share. There's no question about that. Yeah, I found that one of the most inspiring things for political leaders is to see what's been done elsewhere and to see the successes that can happen. I mean, one of the reasons why, I guess, the work that we did in Palo Alto and Silicon Valley was so interesting for others is, we tried new things. We collaborated with the community and with the tech community, of course, at Silicon Valley. And then people recognized it. We were talking about it a lot. I'm not a shy person. I certainly have been sharing what we've been doing well and what hasn't been going so well. And folks around the world reached out and said, "Hey, Jonathan, would you come and talk to me about how you did what you did and what we can learn from that?" So I think there's a hunger for it. By the way, there's a tremendous hunger. There are some great, again, some organizations, quite a lot of online platforms that do share best practices in cities and in governments. Good place to certainly consult. The last thing I would just say on this question is, again, it comes back to a little bit, how do we do this stuff? How do we, make a difference? How do we, make a dent on the SDGs in our city, our region, our country? You don't have to do it alone. I think one of the things that uniquely separates the public sector from the private sector is, we ought not to be competing necessarily. If we can actually collaborate with our partner cities and other agencies to do, to move forward on a new idea or to share the cost, that benefits everyone. A little bit of competition does exist in government. It was a surprise to me. But generally, when we've wanted to deploy a very expensive, complicated initiative like a new public safety system, it was better for us to do it with 2 or 3 cities that surrounded ours rather than to do it alone. And we all benefited. So, cost-wise, just efficiency, but also learnings. And not all 3 cities or 4 cities had to be experts. One could be an expert in one area while the other could be an expert. So there's more opportunities than ever before to share and learn. You just have to go after it. I mean, you have to look and go after it.
Okay. Well, in the dying moments of this session for the KNVI Late Night TV, I'm going to all ask you your takeaways around the SDGs. And actually, because our target audience is the IT professional, now that we've seen that IT can do a lot to help resolve the SDGs, that it should be on the agenda, but if you're not already aware of that, what's your advice, what's your takeaway? What should an IT professional do? What can he do today? Ik ook niet. Sorry.
Siri.
No more meetings. Yeah. So,
what can you do? I think.
Yeah. I'm going to start with you then, Karen.
Yeah. Well, I think reach out. Reach out. It's also what the gentleman
Jonathan
from
said,
the other side of the world was saying. There's so much, specifically nowadays. So with platforms, with everything that we have, it is available. So reach out. There's so many corporations, and I think it was also really nice. We saw this in the Netherlands that just in the private sector, tech tegen corona, which is a beautiful example, I think, of a cooperation also in the Netherlands. There are many initiatives. So reach out, step into. Well, there's so much to
reach out,
there.
be proactive.
Yeah,
good.
Be proactive. Yeah.
Neil, what's your takeaway? Do you have a takeaway for the IT professional? What can they do?
Yeah, one thing I've actually seen that's been very effective is, look, there's one thing we're all interested in. There's probably one small action we can take. Yeah. One person, unfortunately, probably won't solve climate change, but there's small things we can each do. And it may not seem like much, but in the aggregate, small things actually add up. more importantly, it develops the mindset, because we're so used to thinking about, okay, I'm going to build this, or we're going to do this for commercial purposes, or, we're a nonprofit, we can't do some of these other things. We don't live in that kind of world anymore.
Yeah.
It's very much about social enterprise, social entrepreneurship. And I really applaud Generation Z, because I really see them taking the lead on actually living this kind of lifestyle. We can do the same thing. And that all starts with each of us, IT professional or business person or politician. What's one small thing I care about? What small one action I'm willing to take? And then how can I help make that a reality? You take that first step, the second one becomes easier. And next thing you know, you're already on the journey.
Neil, this very much reminds me of all the great videos you post online on LinkedIn, all these feel-good movies, taking small steps. So I encourage all the viewers to look you up on LinkedIn and watch your videos, which actually demonstrate that. Thank you very much. Irakli, what's your advice to the average IT professional?
Can I have two advices?
Sure, sure.
First advice is that take a look at the SDGs, right? This is UN Sustainable Development Goals. Agenda 2030, we want to transform the world by 2030. And this is not a joke. This is a very serious issue. Take a look at all 17 goals, like no poverty, no hunger, good health, quality education, or all 17 of them, and see how your knowledge can contribute to the finding small solutions for these big goals. And all these small solutions make a lot of difference to solve these big goals, because these are the ambitious goals, and no one person, no one organization, or no one country can solve these goals. And the second, of course, is that you can reach out to us, and I'll be always happy to directly talk to the IT professionals from the UN side, from the UN AI Center side, and try to see how their skill and knowledge can contribute to the solutions which we are working on directly. For example, right now we started a big project on how AI can contribute to finding solutions for the sexual abuse of children online. This is a very big issue and growing issue, and we started a multi-year program on that, for example, or other concrete solutions which we are working on. So I'd be very happy to directly discuss with IT professionals to get them involved in the work of the UN to find, as I said, solutions for the big problems.
Great. Well, hopefully people will look you up. And if they contact KNVI and they have a question, we'll make sure that we'll make that connection. Finally, ousewies.
Yeah, can I say something just very feminist?
Yep, sure.
Which is that the IT world is still very masculine. Mm-hmm. And so if I can give one message for the future to the IT specialists is find a really cool female programmer, take her under your wing and help her to grow and be part of it. I think it's one of the things we need to work on is make all these communities more inclusive. And when women get on boards, we know better decisions are making. When women are going to be in different IT departments, I know that will make a difference as well. So make it as inclusive as possible, and the diversity that will bring will also help us achieve more. Plus, of course, that gender equality is one of the SDGs. So you can do that in your own life.
So IT can impact all SDGs, and everybody in IT can make that impact.
Absolutely.
Great. Good.
Frits, I wanted to add something,
yes.
if I could.
Yep.
Sorry, real quick. And you're probably not going to be surprised at my comment on this. I get the opportunity being a tech leader here in Silicon Valley to speak in front of IT professionals all the time. It's a great privilege to be able to do that. And this question comes a lot. How can if I'm just a lowly programmer or a database administrator, and you're not, by the way, how can I make a difference? And I think we are in an age of entrepreneurship, and there's never been a better time to start your own business. Do this yourself. And so the entry barriers are so low. All you need is a great idea, and you'll find an entire ecosystem willing to jump in and help you be successful. As a buyer on the government side for many years, I was looking always for interesting, compelling, groundbreaking solutions to lots of problems, everything from public safety to buildings to libraries and on and on, all the things we do in government. And I didn't see a lot of good solutions a lot of the time, or when I saw solutions, there was only a few. there is amazing white space for new entrants. And so I say to IT professionals, today you might be working for somebody else, but perhaps you should start your own idea, start your own business and change the world that way. And there's two reasons why this is really cool today. Number one is, if you have a business that has a social impact, contributes towards the Sustainable Development Goals, and lots of opportunity there, you're going to go home every day or go to sleep every day feeling quite, satisfied that you're making a difference. And that's an amazing thing to do. But you can also make money. You could also actually make a profit, employ people, create a business. So there are two big reasons, and it satisfies two important needs. So I'm going to say, consider entrepreneurship, and it's open to everyone. Don't think you can't do it.
I think that's a great final advice for everybody out there. You can change the world within a big organization, within an international organization, or with your own startup. But get out there, be proactive, learn, share that knowledge, and realize digital transition is happening, and you can make an impact. I am going to thank my panel. So Jonathan, hey, thank you very much for joining us out of Palo Alto. Neil.
Thank you, Frits.
Thank you for joining us out of Orange County, California. Hey,
my pleasure.
Irakli, hey, thank you very much for joining us. I assume you're in The Hague somewhere?
I'm in The Hague.
You're in The Hague? Okay, well, next time we're going to have a beer together. And finally, Karin Lucevies, thank you for coming to The Hague, sharing your insights, sharing your thoughts and concerns about digitization. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Frits. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dat brengt ons aan het eind van een lange dag Smart Humanity TV. Vanochtend om 9 uur begonnen, Mario, met de opening. En we mogen hem ook afsluiten. Wat zijn je indrukken van de dag? Je had je niet verwacht, hè? Nee.
Mijn indrukken van de dag was dat ik de collega's miste eigenlijk. Die je normaal treft op een congres. En tegelijkertijd vond ik het ook heel leuk om het dus op zo'n manier te doen.
Ja. Daar sluit ik me bij aan.
Ik heb leuke dingen gehoord. En,
ja, ik denk dat we een heel mooi programma hebben neergezet. Gevarieerd. Veel leuke gasten. Laatste groep gasten nog hartelijk dank voor jullie bijdrage op de late avond. Ja, maar we moesten en zouden een late night show hebben. Net zoals dat we een Goedemorgen Nederland wilden hebben. Ja, dan krijg je dus een dag van 9 tot 11. Ik weet niet of we dat nog een keer gaan doen, maar ik heb het best vermaakt de hele dag. Ik hoop jullie thuis ook als kijkers. En tot snel. En dan weer binnenkort live natuurlijk. Maar wie weet gaan we wel door met Smart Humanity TV 2021, 22, 23. Het is mij bevallen, ik vond het leuk. Bedankt voor het kijken allemaal. En deze content is nog tot in de eeuwigheid op YouTube te zien. Dus maak daar gebruik van en dan zien we jullie vast online. Mocht je nog vragen, opmerkingen hebben, zet ze gewoon in het chatvenster op YouTube. Wij zullen zoveel mogelijk proberen te beantwoorden. Dank jullie wel en een prettige avond.
Tot volgend jaar.
En tot de volgende keer.